Imagine walking into a bank, sliding over a financial statement that clearly shows you lost like almost $5 billion last year.
Right, which is not exactly a great start to a pitch.
No, not at all. And then you look the loan officer dead in the eye and you demand a $1.75 trillion valuation for your
Yeah,
business.
I mean, most people would get literally laughed out of the building for that.
Exactly. They'd show you the door. But what if you're the entity holding the keys to the next generation of artificial intelligence and, space infrastructure?
Well, then the bank might just hand you the pen and ask where to sign.
Yeah.
Because the audacity of that kind of ask, it completely changes the physics of how markets operate, especially when the underlying tech is viewed as like an absolute necessity.
And that brings us to today, because it is June 4, 2026, and we are witnessing a massive collision.
A really messy one, too.
Very messy. I mean, we've been living in this AI hype cycle for years now, but today, the astronomical cost of building out this AI future is just slamming head-on into harsh market reality.
Yeah, the rubber is finally meeting the road.
It is. So for this deep dive, we are pulling from Aaron Rose's latest Tech Reader AI Digest. And our mission today is to cut through the noise of this impending $3.7 trillion AI wave.
Which is a staggering number.
Staggering. We want to understand what actually happens when these grand, world-changing technological visions have to face the real world and ask for cold, hard cash.
Because we are formally exiting the era of cheap promises, and we're entering what's basically the execution era.
Right.
The bills are coming due, the servers actually need to be powered, and, well, the products have to function.
Yeah, and to understand how this is playing out, we're going to trace the money from the top down. So we'll look at how private markets are reacting to a history-making IPO gamble, for one, then how that same financial strain is forcing national governments to hoard computing power as, like, a matter of state security.
Yeah, that's a huge shift.
It really is. And finally, we'll look at what happens when a trillion-dollar tech giant throws billions at infrastructure, but then struggles to actually build the software that developers need to use it.
The tension is identical across all three of those levels, really. I mean, vision is easy, but financing and actually shipping, that's incredibly difficult.
Okay, let's unpack this. We have to start with the $1.75 trillion question, which is SpaceX's IPO.
Internally codenamed Project Apex.
Right, Project Apex. And the scale of this offering it's almost impossible to fully grasp. They are looking to raise $75 billion.
Wow.
Yeah, but they are completely throwing out the traditional Wall Street playbook to do it. They've set a fixed offering price of $135 per share.
Just zero negotiation.
Zero. That share price aims them squarely at a $1.75 trillion valuation, which would make it the largest IPO in human history.
Yeah.
And to make it even more unorthodox, they are reserving up to 30% of this.
Which is what, about $22.5 billion?
Yeah, roughly $22.5 billion specifically for retail investors.
Everyday people using brokerage apps.
Exactly.
Which is a massive structural departure. I mean, in a normal large-scale IPO, Wall Street uses this mechanism called book building.
Right, the road shows and all that.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Investment bankers go on a roadshow. They sit down with these massive institutional investors, pension funds, hedge funds, and they gauge demand based on intense financial scrutiny. Spreadsheets, yeah. And if those institutions think the price is too high, the demand is soft, so the offering price comes down. The institutional spreadsheet dictates the final number. But SpaceX is bypassing that entirely.
And I can see why, because I'm looking at the financials they released in their S1 filing, and I'm genuinely struggling to see how any institution would agree to this without laughing.
The numbers are rough.
They are. In 2025, the company had $18.67 billion in revenue, but they posted a GAAP net loss of $4.937 billion.
Yeah, almost $5 billion in the red.
Right. And just so we are clear on the jargon for everyone listening, a GAAP net loss means under generally accepted accounting principles.
After all the creative math is stripped away.
Exactly. When you strip away the creative math, they legitimately bled almost $5 billion.
It's a staggering amount of operational loss. But it's primarily driven by massive capital expenditures in their AI and infrastructure divisions.
Sure, but so why on earth would anyone pay 93.7 times trailing revenue for a company losing that much money?
It's a very fair question.
I mean, to put that multiple in perspective for a casual investor, a highly successful, super fast-growing tech company might trade at like 10 or maybe 15 times its revenue.
Right.
93.7 is a multiple that assumes you are going to literally own the global economy in a decade.
Well, what's fascinating here is the clash of two entirely different valuation languages. You have the spreadsheet language, and then you have the narrative language.
Okay, break that down.
So Morningstar, the financial services firm, they did a standard discounted cash flow analysis on SpaceX. And for anyone unfamiliar, a discounted cash flow, or DCF, is basically the ultimate institutional tool.
The ultimate spreadsheet.
Exactly. You project how much actual cash the business will generate in the future, and you mathematically discount that back to figure out what it's worth today.
And Morningstar arrived at a valuation of $780 billion.
Which, to be clear, is still massive.
Massive. But it's 55% below what SpaceX is demanding.
Right, because the $780 billion is the spreadsheet answer. But that $1.75 trillion valuation, that is the narrative answer. SpaceX knows institutional investors are staring at the AI division, posting a $6.35 billion operating loss. They know that.
Right, they aren't hiding it.
No. So by locking the price at $135 and targeting retail investors, they are betting that the public doesn't care about the DCF.
They care about the story.
Exactly. Retail investors are looking at the fact that Starlink just crossed 10 million subscribers. They're adding up to 1.5 million new users every single month. And the connectivity segment actually posted a $1.19 billion profit last quarter.
So the retail narrative is about funding the fundamental infrastructure of the AI revolution and, making the economics of Mars cargo a reality.
Exactly.
It almost feels like a game of chicken with Wall Street. Like they're saying, we have a story so compelling that if you institutions don't want to pay our sky-high price, we will just take our shares to the public who will.
And this is exactly why this matters to you, to everyone listening, regardless of whether you actually care about rockets.
Yeah.
This single event is a massive stress test for the upcoming $3.7 trillion AI IPO wave. We are talking about the eventual public listings of companies like Anthropic and OpenAI.
Because if the market absolutely rejects SpaceX's narrative valuation and the stock just crashes, it sends a chilling signal.
A huge one.
It tells every banker structuring those future AI deals that the public will not subsidize these massive revenue multiples anymore.
If a fixed price gamble fails, it basically resets the board for every tech company waiting in the wings. The era of writing blank checks for AI promises would effectively be over.
And that strain in the private market, the sheer difficulty of raising $75 billion to build AI infrastructure, it's causing a massive ripple effect.
Yeah, it's spilling over.
Because it's not just tech billionaires realizing how expensive this is. Entire sovereign governments are looking at the private market, struggling to fund these data centers, and they're realizing they have a massive vulnerability.
They can't afford to let private corporations, especially foreign ones, hold all the cards.
Exactly.
The realization is dawning that AI infrastructure is no longer a private sector luxury. It's foundational public infrastructure now.
Yeah.
Much like the electrical grid or the highway system.
Which brings us perfectly to our northern neighbors. Up in Toronto, Canada's Prime Minister Mark Carney and AI Minister Evan Solomon just unveiled this massive government-backed initiative called AI for All.
Right.
We're talking about a commitment of over $2 billion, and the specifics are incredibly ambitious. They're partnering with private capital to build multiple 100-megawatt data centers.
And just to contextualize that for a moment, a standard large-scale enterprise data center might require somewhere between, say, 10 and 20 megawatts of power. So aiming for multiple 100-megawatt facilities means you are effectively building the power draw of entire medium-sized cities, strictly to process artificial intelligence calculations.
It's an industrial revolution scale of power.
It really is.
And alongside that, Canada is building a world-leading public supercomputer. They're launching a $100 million health sector data space, which is designed to securely link clinical trial data across the country.
Yep.
And they're even rolling out free entry-level AI literacy training to every single Canadian citizen.
It's a full-stack national strategy. It addresses the hardware, the data integration, and the human workforce all simultaneously.
Well, here's where it gets really interesting.
Yeah.
During the press conference, Prime Minister Carney was pressed on whether Canada was just trying to push out U.S. tech providers. And his response was blunt. He said, "This is a strategy any sentient country is taking. This is fundamentally strategic." Now, I have to play devil's advocate here for a second. Is this actually a necessity, or is this just nationalistic protectionism wrapped up in tech jargon? I mean, governments historically do a terrible job of building cutting-edge technology compared to the private sector.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, you'll see why the phrase sovereign compute has suddenly become the most critical term in global geopolitics.
Sovereign compute, right.
Yeah. Protectionism implies you're trying to shield a domestic industry from fair competition. Sovereign compute is about basic national survival. As Aaron Rose highlights in the source material, Canada is the third G7 nation just this week to make a formal government-level AI infrastructure commitment.
3 major economies in a single week.
Yes. The United States issued a new executive order on sovereign data facilities, the European Union released an energy AI roadmap, and now Canada.
Wow.
Furthermore, we just saw a massive $20 billion merger between 2 AI firms, Cohere and Aleph Alpha, which had explicit documented backing from both the Canadian and German governments.
That's huge.
Democracies are waking up to a terrifying reality. If your healthcare logistics, your military supply chains, and your financial sector are all running on compute power owned by foreign corporations.
Even corporations from allied nations.
Exactly. Even allies. You have essentially surrendered your sovereignty.
It's like discovering you don't own the water pipes leading into your own country, and someone else can just turn the valve off at any time.
That is a perfect analogy, and the Canadian strategy document is surprisingly candid about this. It explicitly notes that their domestic sovereign compute capacity is nascent, particularly in the cloud sector.
Right.
So to fix this, they are adopting what they call a build, partner, buy approach. Build the infrastructure domestically when possible, partner with trusted international allies when necessary, and buy existing commercial solutions only as a last resort.
You know, looking at the impartial critiques from the AI Digest, there are definitely areas where this strategy makes brilliant sense, but then there are areas where it seems a bit unhinged from reality.
Yeah, for sure.
Like, the health sector data space is a great example of where it works perfectly. You absolutely want your citizens' medical records housed domestically, protected by your own privacy laws, rather than sitting on a server in another country.
The physical infrastructure targets are also highly concrete. I mean, measuring the construction of a 100-megawatt facility is binary, right? You either built it or you didn't.
Exactly.
Where the strategy veers into political wishful thinking is the economic forecasting. They're projecting the creation of 250,000 AI-related jobs by 2031.
Yeah, I read that and immediately pushed back. How can any government agency project 250,000 specific jobs 5 years into the future, especially in an industry where the underlying algorithmic tech completely reinvents itself every, 6 to 8 months?
The short answer is they can't.
Right.
It's a political projection designed to justify the $2 billion price tag to taxpayers. But the much more severe critique highlighted in the sources is an error of omission.
What did they miss?
Well, Canada drafted an incredibly detailed infrastructure and adoption strategy, but they completely neglected to include a robust framework for AI safety and harm reduction.
So they are building the equivalent of a massive nuclear power plant, but they forgot to draft the safety protocols for the containment dome.
Exactly the risk profile we're talking about. Critics immediately pointed out that this legislative gap is just a ticking clock.
Yeah.
The moment the first major AI-related harm story occurs within Canadian borders, whether it's an algorithmic failure in that new health data space or a severe data breach, the government will be scrambling to enforce policy responses that they haven't even written yet.
Which highlights a fascinating tension. We have SpaceX in the private sector demanding a $1.75 trillion valuation to build the future. We have nations like Canada spending billions just to ensure they have a seat at the table. But none of this hardware, none of these supercomputers or data centers actually matter if the software running on them doesn't work. The grandest infrastructure in the world is totally meaningless if developers can't use it. And that execution trap brings us to Meta.
The harsh reality of actually delivering a product to the ecosystem.
Right. So Meta recently spun up a new AI model out of their secretive superintelligence labs, which is also known internally as TBD Lab.
Yep.
The model is called MuseSpark. Now, this is a massive strategic pivot for Meta because historically their Llama family of AI models were open weights. I want to pause there because that term gets thrown around a lot.
It does.
What is the functional difference for a developer between an open weights model and a closed source model like MuseSpark?
It fundamentally changes the relationship between the creator and the user. An open weights model means the company is essentially handing developers the core architectural blueprints and the pre-trained neural brain.
Okay.
Developers can download it, install it on their own servers, tinker with it, and bake it deeply into their own products for free.
Got it.
A closed source model, however, is a locked fortress. You cannot see the blueprints, you cannot download the brain. The only way to interact with it is to stand outside the fortress, slide a question under the door, and pay a fee to get an answer back.
And the only way to slide that question under the door is through an API, an application programming interface.
Exactly.
It's the connective tissue that allows external apps to talk to Meta's closed model. Now, MuseSpark launched on the consumer-facing Meta AI app back in April, and the chief AI officer promised the developer API was coming soon.
Right.
Yet here we are 2 full months later, and there is still no launch date.
And the delays are reportedly stemming from severe software bugs and basically a realization that their back-end infrastructure wasn't sufficient to handle the anticipated load.
Oof.
The API release was pushed to May, then quietly pushed to June, and the ecosystem is still just waiting.
To me, this is like Meta spending billions to build the world's most advanced, state-of-the-art commercial kitchen. I mean, we know they recently revised their capital expenditure forecast to a staggering $145 billion, mostly for AI infrastructure.
Yeah.
So they build this incredible $145 billion kitchen, but they totally forgot to install doors. The chefs are standing outside, the ingredients are inside, and nobody can cook.
It's a great way to put it.
And looking at the source notes, it really makes you wonder if they are repeating past internal failures. The digest specifically brings up a canceled project called Behemoth.
This raises an important question about the vast gulf between internal laboratory success and real-world deployment.
Yeah.
Because the Behemoth project is a perfect cautionary tale. Meta quietly canceled that massive AI initiative last year simply because their engineers hit a wall and couldn't improve its reasoning capabilities.
Wow.
Following that failure, they completely reorganized the AI division, brought in heavy hitters, and MuseSpark was supposed to be the definitive proof that the reorganization was successful.
But if you can't ship the API, you haven't proven anything to the market. You've just proven you have a shiny toy in your own laboratory.
Meta is aggressively claiming that their internal proprietary benchmarks show MuseSpark beating xAI's Grok and competing head-to-head with the top models from OpenAI and Anthropic.
But without an API, those claims are completely unverified ghosts.
Exactly. Independent developers and researchers cannot rigorously test a closed model without API access.
And more importantly, developers are not going to pause their entire business roadmaps to wait for Meta to sort out its software bugs.
They absolutely will not. And this is the core ecosystem reality that Aaron Rose drives home in his analysis. He writes a line that should be framed in every tech boardroom. Benchmarks don't build ecosystems, APIs do.
That's a great line.
It's so true. Every single week that Meta delays this release is a week that enterprise developers are deepening their financial and architectural ties with Claude, with Gemini, and with OpenAI Codex.
The switching costs are just too immense. I mean, if a developer spends 3 months building their entire application architecture around Claude's API, they aren't going to tear the whole foundation down just because Meta finally manages to fix their bugs in late July.
The inertia of the ecosystem is incredibly powerful. And because Meta made the strategic choice to pivot away from the open weights community goodwill they built with Llama,
Right.
the API is literally the only mechanism they have to capture market share. If you lock your model behind a closed source wall but fail to provide the API door, you do not have a developer platform.
You just have a very expensive internal tool.
Exactly. You merely have a very expensive internal tool.
Yeah.
And it is going to be incredibly difficult to justify a $145 billion infrastructure investment to shareholders if that capital only resulted in an internal tool.
So what does this all mean? If we trace the through line of everything we've explored today, it feels like the honeymoon phase of artificial intelligence is definitively permanently over.
Yeah, the party's over.
We've watched the public markets gear up to harshly judge SpaceX's demand for a $1.75 trillion valuation, demanding real financial mechanics over science fiction narratives.
Right.
We've seen sovereign nations like Canada realize that they have to spend billions of taxpayer dollars just to secure the computing borders of their own healthcare and infrastructure.
Mm-hmm.
And we've watched Meta fumble the commercial rollout of a $145 billion bet simply because they couldn't execute the connective software. We are squarely in the messy, unforgiving execution era.
We really are.
The hype phase is done. Now the bank is checking the foundation, the bills are due, and the products actually have to work.
And for you, the listener, The reason you should be paying close attention to these massive macro-level struggles is because they directly dictate the reality of your micro-level daily life.
Absolutely.
The institutional reaction to that SpaceX IPO is going to heavily influence the valuation of the tech stocks sitting right there in your 401k or retirement account.
Yep.
Canada's sovereign compute strategy is going to dictate the actual data privacy and security of your personal healthcare records. And Meta's failure to ship a working API today determines exactly which tools, apps, and services will even be available for you to use a year from now.
It's a powerful reminder. The macro always impacts the micro.
It does. And I want to leave you with a final thought to mull over. We've seen today that building the infrastructure for tomorrow's artificial intelligence requires record-breaking private valuations, and it requires massive multi-billion-dollar sovereign investments from entire countries.
Yep.
But if governments are increasingly walling off their digital ecosystems in the name of national security, and tech giants are building closed-source models that require $145 billion investments.
Investments so large, they're forced to lock developers into paid, walled gardens just to recoup their costs.
Exactly. Are we inadvertently building an AI future that is simply too expensive and too fractured for the average innovator to participate in?
We started this deep dive talking about massive, gleaming skyscrapers built on debt, waiting for the bank to see if the foundation would hold. But if all of this infrastructure actually gets built and the walls go up, who will actually be able to afford the toll to get in the front door?
That might be the most important trillion-dollar question of all.